Hello, Awesome Soul here, and welcome back to another drone discussion video. This time, I will be going over the latest trailer that was released, and that would be the painting and texturing trailer. Now, do not be fooled, there is a lot more in this trailer that will pertain to those that don't necessarily like the arena building, but more so like the drone building. There is something here for you as well. Not only that, I will take this opportunity to just sort of give my thoughts on what I would like to see added to the game movement-wise, as well as go over a few exclusive images that I have been able to get my hands on. So yes, fancy stuff is in this episode. Hopefully you stick around until the very end. Now, starting off, I'm sure you've been watching this unfold, and we have painting, but not just any old painting. This, my friends, is texture painting. So you can actually completely change up the way certain blocks, or I guess pillars even. I guess you can't really call those blocks now, can you? But yes, you can change up and quote-unquote paint pretty much anything you want. There are a massive amount of options to choose from, and in the trailer they do state that you will actually be able to change the color of these textures in the future. They are working on that. Now, another thing that is really awesome and pretty unique, I haven't actually seen anything like this in any other kind of building game, but the textures are actually allowed to be changed by the player in a sort of kaleidoscope way. It's really unique how they've done this. So as you can see here by this little demonstration, they basically allow you to change two variables on it. And of course, as they say in the trailer, the GUI you see here isn't completed. They have some more work to do on it to make things a bit more clear. But in the bottom left, you'll be able to see sort of two sliders, one square and one round. One is sort of like a clock where you can twist it and it'll change it that way. And then there is also the square, which appears to be sort of the middle, quote unquote, of the texture. Like, you change up where the middle of the texture is. So instead of having the regular texture be, like the 4 blocks, for example, you have the middle in the exact center of those 4 blocks, you can make it so it's off to the side somewhere. Now, I don't actually have the technology in front of me, so I can't do a proper display, but hopefully that rather poor description gives you an idea of what I'm trying to get at. I'm sure the visuals that you're seeing in front of you do a far better job than me explaining it, actually, come to think of it. But yes, all of that is really cool. They also have a decal system, or decals, depending on which pronunciation you prefer. I prefer to go with decals, because it's a lot more fancy. But yes, so again, what they have here, just a teeny taste of the decals they actually want to get into the game once it's fully released. As you can see, they do have numbers as well as a few letters, so hopefully you will be able to spell out whatever you want, because you can scale these to any size you would like. So if you want to have really tiny, fine writing, then I'm sure that would be just fine, I assume. Hopefully, well, actually, that's a very good question. Will there be a limit to how many decals you can put on a map? Or is it completely infinite? Because on the Discord server, yes, they have a Discord server. If you did not know, I would definitely check that out. They did mention in a sort of group discussion that they will have a sort of ranking system. Obviously, they have their typical ranking system of this map is really popular, this map is highly detailed, that sort of thing, but like, artistic, detailed. But this system that they're also proposing is one that has a computer load ranking. And how this is going to work is if you have a massive amount of trees, for example, let's say you have a really dense forest, then your map will most likely be rated rather highly by players, or what they're most likely going to do is have the computer automatically see how CPU intensive the map is, because this is something I could see the actual game computer, for a lack of a better term, actually calculating. So you wouldn't really need to be submitted by users like the artistic score, etc, etc. But yeah, a little bit off topic on that one, but I think it was fairly important. But now, I can go back to the other thing that I do need to talk about, and that is the second half, I guess you could call, of the trailer. And that is the part that shows off the ground drone, which is something we haven't seen in, I guess, high detail, I guess you could say. We have seen it in the trailer, the racing trailer, that is. But that trailer just sort of showed off gameplay. This one actually has a bit of a voiceover to it. So what they do in this part is basically give us a bit more detailed information. As you can see here, it is the sort of hover skis, as I referred to them. But no, these are, in fact, hover pads, which look very, 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 very sexy, if I do say so myself. But the most important thing to get out of this is the jump feature that we saw is not inherent to these hover pads. It is a specific part you can install. So this means that you can actually add this part to any drone that you would like. If you've got insect legs, boom, slap it on there and you can jump super high. If you got the mech legs, boom, slap it on there and you can jump super high as well. They've also talked about tank tracks, as well as wheels, which I'll actually get to in a little bit in the video. So having a part like that in the game is really, really awesome, just because it shows that there are going to be more parts along those lines, and what that means is you are able to highly customize your drone. Like, I can foresee the amount of customization in this game to be absolutely incredible, because they also have a heat system, so you gotta add things like heat sinks to get rid of your excess heat, for example. I'm sure there's gonna be many, many more parts like that. Like, really small parts that add up to a greater whole, rather than just a lot of really, really fancy parts that automatically are really awesome, if that makes any sense. Like, you've got to add some small parts to make a really awesome drone, instead of just having one part that is automatically going to guarantee you an awesome drone. I'm sure that makes sense to most people, I would hope. But yeah, the one thing, though, that I am very curious to know is whether or not this jump thruster will actually work on air drones. So what hopefully this will mean, if it is indeed attachable on air drones, is that you can raise and lower your altitude incredibly quickly. That would be really awesome. But it would be kind of hard to balance, though. That's the only thing, if they go with something like that. Just because I can foresee the fact that it looks like this jump thruster has very little build-up time, that maybe it would be very overpowered. Actually, it'd be really overpowered. Huh. So, yeah, maybe not do that. Because I guess it kind of makes sense that it's actually pushing off of something, and that something is the ground. So if it's just kind of pushing in the air, then I guess it's not really going to work. It seems to be more of a sort of gravity pulse wave thing, because there's no, like, jets of thrust coming out of it. I know that's gotten a little bit rambly, so I guess I will take this opportunity to ask you, yes you, the viewer who is watching right now, what are your thoughts on this jump thruster? And I guess, what are your opinions on ground drones? Because after watching this trailer and the jump thruster, I'm actually really, really interested in ground drones now. I thought they were kind of just an afterthought, but they seem like they're going to be very fun to play. But speaking of ground drones, and yes, I know I alluded to it earlier in the video, but wheels are definitely a thing. So this is, or well, it was one of the exclusive images I had, but it is exclusive no more because they made a tweet about it and it is now publicly available. But this is what seems to be some concept art. It could be 3D renders, but it definitely looks like concept art to me. But either way, it does show off the wheels, which we haven't seen yet. So the wheels we do see here are pretty basic, but I'm sure that there are most likely going to be multiple wheel types, just how we've seen multiple different types of hover fans in the game, each with presumably different stats and different uses. So what I could see is sort of a monster tire type of wheel, one that's really good at getting through mud, and then these wheels here, for example, would be really, really fast on smooth surfaces, or I guess paved surfaces, for a lack of a better term. Basically just the blocks that the players are allowed to place down. And another thing, I'm sure most of you have probably said, oh, well, you know, we've got hover fans, we've got those hover pads, which look really cool and incredibly fast, and they can even strafe, why would I use wheels? Well, that goes back to what I was saying before with the whole heat system, as well as, the numerous other systems that are in the game. So, my guess here is that if you use wheels, you're going to have a lot more energy to work with, or maybe they're going to use a lot less heat, maybe they produce less noise, although I would honestly see the hover pads producing less noise. Yes, there is indeed a noise system in the game, so certain parts will produce louder noises. Like a chain gun, for example, would be incredibly noisy compared to a laser gun, for example. And various parts are most likely going to vary in stats as well, so one hover fan might be louder than another. So it's really awesome, the amount of customization they have in this game. Or at least they have planned in this game. It's not currently out yet. But they have made a lot of progress. For those who don't know, they've actually been working on the game for about 2.5 years before even announcing anything. And that definitely seems like something they are trying to promote in this game. What do I mean? Well, basically what it seems like they're going for is you have to build a drone for every single situation that you can foresee. Obviously, if you go on a water-heavy map, you would most likely want to bring some parts that would allow you to go over the surface of the water, like the hover pads, or swim underneath the water. Like, one of the hover fans we have seen is actually capable of doing that. And like, if you were on a really small enclosed map, you would most likely want to go with a bot that had a very low noise signature. So basically a really stealthy bot, rather than, well, a really massive hulking behemoth. Speaking of massive hulking behemoths, this thing right here is just that, although not quite as large, come to think of it, as one of the other drones we've seen. This thing certainly is very menacing looking, I will give it that. But this basically demonstrates another thing I would like to note: the fact that you can shape your drone pretty much however you want. The quote-unquote blocks that will be in the game seem to be very drastic in the amount of shapes they have. So some are really long and pointy, others are sort of, typical blocks, and others are, well, like this one we see here, very oddly shaped. But what I'm showing off here is just to give you an idea of the amount of customization as far as, physical shape goes for your drone. It's going to be really high, so you could potentially make some really accurate representations of fictional vehicles, or even real vehicles for that matter. I could totally see like the Pelican from Halo making it into the game as a drone. Actually, that's something that I might end up making. That's also another good question. When you get your hands on the game, what kind of vehicles would you like to make? Are you going to go for a typical drone, or are you going to go for more of an artistic recreation style for your drones? I'll probably end up doing a mix of both. Now, the last thing I would like to do for closing this video out is go over a little piece of the information that I've gathered from being on the Discord and chatting with the developers. So I'm sure most of you remember, back in the original trailer, at the very end, there was what I can only describe as sort of a dragon centipede drone. It was very weird. But what I have learned from the developers is that the way the whole thing curves while flying through the air is actually based off of a quote-unquote tail system. So it seems like there will be tail parts. Not sure if this will make it into the final game, but, we'll have to wait and see. But taking a close look at this image here, we have what looks like different tail section parts, as well as a sort of end cap, I guess you could say, for this tail system. So each section seems to have a mount on either side. The very front one holds a missile pod, where pretty much every other one has a mount for the wing pieces. Not only that, it seems like you're also able to mount things on top as well. As we can see at the very back there, we have a vertical wing, basically acting as a rudder of sorts. And what we also have is some sort of structure coming out of the top. It seems like it's one large system, possibly some sort of reactor or some other kind of unit, because it doesn't seem to be made up of individual blocks, although I could be wrong. Is this actually part of the tail section? Is there like a special separate tail section? Or is this just something mounted on top of it? Also, can we mount things below the tail section as well? All very interesting information, and not entirely sure what this whole tail section would be good for, other than looking incredibly badass. So I will give it that. The badass rating is definitely a 10 out of 10. For me. So there you have it. That will do it for today's video. I know this one was kind of all over the place, but I figured it would be a good idea to get this kind of information out there in case some of you might have missed it, for those who haven't actually found their way onto the Discord server just yet. Of course, if you somehow don't know what Discord is, basically it's sort of a big, huge community hub where creators, such as myself, yes, I do have my own Discord, can basically run their own mini forums of sorts. It's always live, and there's always people there posting. And there's different sections, and there's even voice chat as well. So if you want to play some games with a friend, then hop on into Discord and you can go ahead and do that. Whether it be on my server or your own server, or even the D.R.O.N.E server. Although that's definitely meant for actual discussion of D.R.O.N.E. But yeah, the developers are always active on there, and I have seen them answering a fair amount of questions. Of course, if they're online, that is. On the first day it was open, they even had a voice chat where basically everyone in the Discord was there chatting it up. It was a bit of a mess early on apparently, but when I joined, it seemed to have quieted down a lot. And it was basically the developers answering questions and us, the community, just giving a talk to them. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully they end up doing that again. They have actually talked about doing that, but no given dates. Anyways, guys, I have rambled on for far too long. I appreciate you watching all the way until the very end. And with that, I of course have been the Awesome Soul. I thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.